You ever wonder what happens when the quiet one in the room is the only person who sees the whole game? They called me a ghost, a voice behind the curtain. Most people didn't even know I existed until the day my name slipped through a wire and almost got people killed. That was the day everything I built started to fall apart. And the worst part? The man who helped tear it down was the same man who taught me to be invisible in the first place. If you think this is just another story about spies and secrets, look closer. This is about language, betrayal, and what it costs to finally be seen. If you're ready to find out what really happened, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Trust me, nothing in this story is what it seems. My name is Eliza Marlowe. I'm 29 years old, and I was born at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to a father who believed in the kind of strength that leaves bruises and a silence that teaches obedience. I grew up in a house where medals outnumbered smiles, where the walls carried more orders than conversations. My father, Colonel Paul Marlowe, never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone could shut a door, straighten a spine, or end a dream before it even began. And mine? My dream was words, not the barked commands of a drill sergeant or the cold efficiency of battlefield briefings, but language, the whisper of Persian poetry across a dusty page, the winding syntax of Georgian, the rhythm of Arabic spoken at twilight in some alley far from home. I fell in love with languages the way some people fall into rebellion, completely, and without apology. I was 12 the first time I picked up a shortwave radio, twisting the dial late at night while my father was still at the base. Static, hums, fractured voices, like ghosts speaking across time zones. I didn't always understand the words, but I understood the feeling, that the world was vast and layered, and that there were meanings hiding inside sounds. I filled notebooks with scribbled translations, phonetic guesses, and half-finished codes. My father walked in once, saw the pages spread across the floor, and said only this: "If you can't shoot it, fly it, or carry it into combat, it's not worth your damn time." That was the end of that conversation, but not the end of the dream. No one tells you how loud silence can be when it comes from someone you want to impress. Every award I won, every test I aced, every scholarship letter, all greeted with that same nod, as if excellence were expected, but never celebrated. So I stopped waiting for applause. I earned a federal grant through a rare linguistic aptitude test that most candidates didn't even know existed. The results placed me in the top 0.01% of pattern recognition and auditory memory. I was recruited before graduation, handed a sealed envelope at the age of 22 that changed my life. No ceremony, no headlines, just a handshake and 3 words: "You're in, quietly." From there, everything moved underground, figuratively and sometimes literally. I trained in secure compounds, learned to interpret dialect drift, emotion-modulated speech, stress patterns under duress. Eventually, I was assigned to Black Ops language support, operations that didn't exist, languages that didn't officially matter, and briefings that never left the room. To most people, I didn't exist. To the ones who knew, I was Ghostwalker. I've decoded whispers passed through prisons, intercepted coded lullabies spoken between smugglers, read meaning in silence, and caught betrayals that only showed up in how someone didn't pronounce a consonant. Language is a weapon, the most underestimated one we have. It can disguise intent, trigger revolutions, or dissolve them. And I was very, very good at it. Still, I was always on the edge. Never front and center. Never seen. Even inside my unit, few people knew my real name. I lived in echoes and shadows, and most days, I preferred it that way. But shadows have weight, and eventually, They reach for you. There was a moment, just one, where I wondered if my father would ever hear about what I'd done. Not know, not officially, but feel. Maybe through a fellow officer, a whisper in some hallway about the girl who cracked the code that saved 2 platoons in Kandahar. Something like that. But if he heard, he never said. Then came Syria, a routine support op, embedded through satellite comms and live translation relay. Nothing I hadn't done before. A team moved in. I stayed online from a field base, eyes on every signal, every phrase. My voice in their earpiece, soft and fast. He said, "Waiting for moonlight. That's code. Move now." Then the comms glitched, just for a second, and someone used my name, not Ghostwalker. My name, Eliza. That shouldn't have been possible. I remember the silence that followed. Not the technical kind, the human kind. The kind where someone realizes the ground just shifted. The mission unraveled in minutes. We lost control of the perimeter. One agent was injured, and the extraction was messy. Messy enough to leave questions, and questions in our world are worse than bullets. That was the day the whisper turned against me. The day I stopped being invisible. I'd always known the value of being invisible. It wasn't about hiding. Not really. It was about control. About watching everything while no one watched you. In the field, invisibility kept you alive. It let you see the slip in a man's accent before he pulled a trigger. It let you catch hesitation in a single syllable, detect fear behind a fluent phrase. Being unseen was the closest thing to power I'd ever felt. Until the day it vanished. They didn't throw me into a cell. This wasn't that kind of betrayal. It was quieter. Colder. They took away my access credentials first. I came into the base that morning and couldn't log in. My comms badge blinked red. That's when I knew something had shifted. By noon, I was called in. It wasn't an interrogation, not officially, just a debriefing in a room without windows. 2 men sat across from me. One was from internal oversight. The other was unfamiliar. Civilian clothes, pale hands, eyes that didn't blink enough. They asked polite questions. Do you recall the moment your alias was compromised? Have you ever shared your name outside of protocol? Can you think of anyone who might have reason to expose your identity? They said, expose, not leak. A small but important distinction. Leak suggested something accidental. Expose implied intent. I gave them everything I had. Timestamps, field reports, encrypted call logs. But I saw it in their faces. This wasn't about finding truth. It was about containing damage. They didn't accuse me outright. That's not how it works at this level. No one yells. No one flips tables. Instead, they thank you for your cooperation. They smile, and they ask you to take a leave of absence for operational clarity. And just like that, I was shut out. No missions, no access, no answers. But the questions didn't leave me. How did they get my name? That file was buried so deep even I couldn't see it. Only 4 people had clearance to it. And I was one of them. I thought about every possible breach point. Had I said something without realizing? Had I been followed? Or had someone given it away? That thought sat in my throat like a stone. There was a knock on my door 3 nights later. I hadn't told anyone I was back in DC, but when I opened the door, there stood Captain Matt Carson, gray hoodie, military stance, eyes scanning the hallway even as he smiled. He didn't say anything at first, just held out a paper bag. "Chinese," he said. "You still like that garlic tofu?" I let him in without a word. We sat on the floor, legs crossed like we used to in training. No uniforms, just old habits and unspoken history. He was one of the few who knew both versions of me, the girl who used to read Farsi poetry under her breath, and the woman who could translate a dying man's last words mid-combat. After the first beer, he said what we were both thinking. They're not looking for the truth, Eliza. They're looking for a narrative, and you're the cleanest loose end they can cut. I didn't respond, because part of me already knew that. But there's something else, he added. Someone scrubbed part of the communication archive right before your name was used. 10 seconds of silence. Gone. Clean delete. No metadata. That should have been impossible. But the worst part? That kind of access could only come from above. Not just someone in IT, not a field agent, someone who had root clearance. I felt it then. That pressure in the air, like when a storm is building and the clouds haven't cracked open yet. But the static in your skin knows something's coming. Something about this wasn't random. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting every person who had ever said my name aloud in confidence, every handler, every analyst, every family member. And there it was. That slow, unwelcome thought, my father, Colonel Paul Marlowe. I hadn't seen him in over a year, not since the base ceremony where he barely acknowledged my service award. The only thing he said to me that day was, "You're not like the others. You hide too much." Coming from him, that was the closest thing to a compliment I'd ever received. He didn't even know what I did, officially, or so I thought. But there were rumors about a defense contract he'd signed, something about a new security protocol being tested in our internal systems, a handshake deal with a private firm that streamlined access flow. Streamlined access. Two words that sound efficient, harmless. But in our world, that meant more doors open to fewer people. I stared at my screen for hours that night, tracing digital breadcrumbs I wasn't supposed to follow. My old clearance was gone, but I still had mirrors, back doors, tricks I'd built into systems years ago, just in case. And slowly I began to see it. A pattern, a single authorization key, one line of code that showed up in both my personnel file and in the deleted archive Matt had mentioned. It was his. My father's. But that didn't make sense. Why would he even access that level? He was infantry command, not cyber. He never touched our department's systems. Unless someone asked him to. Or unless he didn't know what he was authorizing. Either way, I had to find out. Because if what I was starting to believe was true, then this wasn't just a breach. It was a betrayal. And it had my name written all over it. I didn't want it to be him. I kept telling myself that over and over, like a child holding their hands over their ears to block out a thunderclap. I didn't want to find what I was finding. But there's a particular kind of horror in seeing a pattern take shape, pixel by pixel, code by code, and realizing that the picture it forms is someone you love, even if they never loved you back in quite the same way. The authorization key I found was old, buried beneath a dozen layers of bureaucratic camouflage. It had been used months ago on a contract labeled Viridian Pathway, a test program allegedly designed to improve cross-department coordination by allowing temporary protocol overrides for senior officers, a mouthful of nothing, bureaucratic snow. But in practice, that override had given someone the ability to access highly classified records with just one approval signature. Only a handful of people in the military chain of command were authorized to sign off on something like that. One of them was Colonel Paul Marlowe, my father. I tried convincing myself that maybe he hadn't read the fine print. Maybe he'd rubber-stamped the request like so many officers did, trusting the vendors, trusting the language. It wouldn't be the first time a mistake got buried under good intentions. But my gut said otherwise. I still remember the time I was 16, and he made me write a 3-page essay explaining the implications of signing any official document, even a school field trip waiver, without reading it. His exact words, "There's no such thing as an innocent signature." And now I had his. Right there, tied to the very system vulnerability that had led to my name being exposed. But intent? That was harder to trace. I needed more than code fragments and guesswork. I needed confirmation from someone inside the program. There was one person I could think of, a contractor, a name I recognized from the Viridian logs. Anthony Griggs, cyber liaison for the defense vendor. I remembered him because during one of our joint briefings months ago, he kept asking questions that made my skin crawl. Not technical questions, but personal ones. So, Ghostwalker? Why the alias? You ever worry about being too invisible? I hadn't thought much of it then. I just marked him as a creep with a security badge. But now, those questions felt different. I tracked him down at a private conference in Arlington. Defense contractors loved their wine and circuitry galas. Everyone in a tux, pretending they weren't selling software designed to predict drone strikes. I came in as someone else. A fake name, a tailored dress, borrowed confidence. He spotted me before I could speak. Smiled like he knew. "You clean up nice, Ghostwalker." I didn't flinch. "You know my name now, don't you?" His smile didn't falter. Names are just doors. The interesting part is what they lead to. That was all I needed. He was part of it. Maybe not the architect, but a willing player. He didn't admit it outright, but the way he danced around his words, how casually he let things slip, like he wanted me to know, it all pointed to something bigger. And then, just as I turned to leave, he dropped the final match. "You know, your father really believed in this project, said it would clean up all the noise." Shame it backfired. Backfired. Not went wrong. Not was misused. Backfired, which meant he knew it was dangerous, which meant they all did. I left without looking back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a flash drive, a half-empty bottle of scotch, and shaking hands. On that drive were system logs, security approvals, and a time-stamped access trail that pointed directly, unavoidably, to Paul Marlowe. I could have made it public. I could have destroyed him, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I prepared a report. Precise, professional, sanitized. Every piece of evidence was submitted to internal oversight through a secure drop. No names. No accusations. Just the data. Let them follow the trail themselves. They did. And just like that, everything changed. He was suspended from active command within 48 hours. The military doesn't publicize these things, but word still travels in small circles. There were whispers, negligence, conflict of interest, possible misconduct. Nothing proven yet, but enough to stain a name that had never been questioned before. I thought that would be the end of it. Until I got the call. A private internal tribunal. Not open to the public. A closed-door proceeding where he'd be allowed to defend himself, or confess. I didn't plan to attend. I wasn't invited. But then the message came. Colonel Paul Marlowe has requested the presence of Agent E. Marlowe as an observer. Observer, not witness, not daughter, not victim. Just observer. I went. The room was small. No uniforms, no medals, just people, papers, and tension thick enough to taste. He sat at the table, back straight, eyes sharp, the same man I remembered. Except different too. Something quieter in the way he breathed. Something heavier. He didn't deny it. Didn't blame anyone else. Just said this. I signed a contract I thought would strengthen our systems. I didn't read far enough. I didn't ask the right questions. That failure led to a breach that endangered lives, including someone He hesitated, just for a second. Including someone who should have never had to carry the consequences of my oversight. And then, just before they closed the session, he added, I ask only one thing. Do not attach her name to this. She was the one who saw what I didn't. She deserves better. For the first time in my life, I saw my father make a choice not to be a soldier, but a man. He took the fall and left the room without looking back. I stood there for a long time after they adjourned, unsure what I was supposed to feel. Relief? Grief? Vindication? What I felt was empty, like something I'd carried for years had finally fallen off, but it had taken a piece of me with it. I never spoke to him again after that. Not right away. But 3 weeks later, a package arrived at my door. No note. Just an old, battered military pin, his, and a photo I hadn't seen in over a decade. It was me, age 6, holding a picture book upside down, sitting cross-legged in the living room. He was in the background, not looking at the camera, but he was watching me read. The ceremony wasn't supposed to matter. It was just another formality in a long chain of quiet, classified acknowledgments, the kind the public never hears about, and the people who attend never talk about. A handful of agents, department heads, internal brass, polished shoes, folded hands, names spoken behind closed doors, and yet, as I sat there beneath the seal of the agency, watching the room fill with people who had seen my work but never seen me, I felt something shifting in my chest. Not pride, not vindication, just gravity. Like this moment was pulling together the weight of 1,000 silent days. The director stood at the front, Beverly Street steel gray suit, a voice sharp enough to cut glass. We'd never been close, but I respected her. She knew the value of silence. She understood how some of us fought wars in shadows so deep even the victory felt invisible. She began to speak. There are operations that never make the news, names that never make the record. But there are voices, clear, precise, vital, that shape the outcome of history without ever stepping into the light. Today, we name one. My heart stopped. That wasn't part of the script. I turned, instinctively scanning the room, every face still, every breath held. She looked directly at me. Agent Eliza Marlowe, codenamed Ghost Walker, for exemplary service in field-critical linguistic intelligence across 7 classified operations, and for actions leading to the exposure of internal system vulnerabilities that endangered active personnel, you are hereby commended and officially recognized by name. The silence that followed was unlike any I'd known before. This wasn't the cold, dismissive kind I'd grown up with. It was reverent, alive, a pause full of meaning, and then applause. Quiet at first, then growing, measured but real. I stood, not because I felt deserving, but because some part of me finally believed I could. I met eyes I never had before. Some nodded, a few smiled, and then I saw him. In the back row. Civilian clothes, shoulders square, a little older, a little grayer. My father. He said nothing, but for the first time in my life, I didn't need him to. His presence was the speech. After the ceremony, I left the building alone. No security escort. No handler waiting in a black SUV. Just me and the sky. It was starting to rain. Not the kind of rain that sends people running, the slow, gentle kind that feels more like a washing than a warning, the kind that makes you stop and feel the weight of the air. I stood there for a while, face tilted up, letting it touch me. It felt good, clean. I didn't go back to fieldwork. Some doors don't need to be reopened. Some chapters end, not because they failed, but because they've done what they were meant to do. I took a position at Langley, not as an agent, but as a mentor. I created a program to train young linguists, not just in language, but in listening. Really listening. For tones, for subtext, for the stories people don't realize they're telling. I named the course Echo Protocol. The first day of class, I told them this. Language is not about words, it's about weight. When someone speaks, they're handing you something fragile. Treat it like truth, even when it's wrapped in lies. Some of them understood right away. Others would learn. One afternoon, while clearing out a drawer in my new office, I found the photo again, the one my father sent. Me, 6 years old, holding a book upside down, grinning like I'd just solved the world, and him, behind me, watching, not correcting, not commanding, just watching. That photo said more than any apology ever could. It told me he had seen me, even then. Maybe he hadn't understood me, maybe he never would, but he'd watched, and when the time came, he chose to protect my name. Not with a weapon, not with orders, but by finally telling the truth, even when it cost him everything else. Some love is loud, some love is learned late, but it's still love. I placed the photo on my desk, next to the faded military pin he'd sent. Not because I needed the reminder, but because some ghosts deserve to be named, and some silence deserves to be broken.